Negotiation is something you're somewhat familiar with. You go through it every day. And, well, today you're getting the disembodied voice because of the size of the slides. Anyway, there are entire books and courses about negotiation. I'm just giving you the oversight and a crash course in it. Now, negotiation, it's about a process. The big thing about negotiation is how do you put value on things. And then this lecture will wrap up with some examples. So negotiation is a process where multiple parties come to an agreement through dialogue and exchange. So the way negotiation works is you got a seller and a buyer, and naturally the seller is going to want more than what the buyer is prepared to pay. And typically what a seller will do is come out higher than what they really want because they figure they have room to bargain. And the same thing also happens with the buyer. The problem is that the gap is much bigger, and so this could start to become contentious. And so if you're far apart, you have a contentious negotiation. If you're fairly close, you're on the same page. And buyers and sellers get regrets. Who pays more? Who priced less? Now, the rule in negotiation is never be the first mover. However, I've been in negotiations where people literally just sat there, and we just sat there for like 15 minutes just staring at each other. And so I was the one who ended up caving because I just wanted to get the ball rolling. Anyway, some of the constraints are things like time, money, flexibility, how many people are actually involved in negotiation, and different values like that. So the process is that the seller, you're in a happy place if you can go up, and the buyer, you're not very happy. So you're going to settle somewhere in the middle. Where exactly in the middle are you going to settle? One trick or technique is, say you're at 10 and I'm at 5 and you think you're going to end up at 7.5. Well, the 5 comes up to, say 6, and then the top comes down to 9, and so you're still halfway into the gap. And then the lower person can say, you know, we're so close to a deal. If you could just come up a little bit more, then yeah, we can make a deal. And so what will happen is the person low will come up to the middle to about 7.5, and then the person on top will say, make it 8 and we've got a deal, or make it 8.5 and we have a deal. And the thing is, the increment is so small that you don't really think about fulfilling it. And so that's one way to close a deal, because you say, well, we're so close. Come on, just give me a little bit more. In terms of some of the big negotiations, Facebook got Instagram for $1 billion. Today it's worth $35 billion. They paid $33 a head. And everybody thought Facebook was crazy. But Facebook said it's a platform. And that's why they overpaid so much for Oculus. Microsoft set a record for buying LinkedIn, and on the other hand, they paid a premium for Nokia, and it was a big loss. And Microsoft learned that basically they're really not that good a device company. Even they paid a ton of money to try to get Xbox up and running. The thing about LinkedIn is, did that make sense for Microsoft? Well, who does Microsoft sell to? They're really not selling straight to consumers. They're business kind of sells. They're more B2B. And so what is LinkedIn? Business. That's Microsoft's strength. Google acquires YouTube. Made a mint load off of that. On the other hand, they took a bath in Motorola. Same mistake that Microsoft made. What drives your prices? Supply and demand is a very big thing. Not enough supply, higher demand. How do they make decisions? And decisions are driven by, how much information do I have? How much can I process? People have different brains. Some people can process more information than others. How much time do I have? And what kind of personalities do they have? Meaning, are they hedonistic? Are they rational? And that has a very big impact on how you do negotiation. And is there added value in there? For example, Instagram probably wouldn't have had as much value unless it hooked up with a large social media business like Facebook. So what is it that we value? We value economics, money. How does it make us feel? And is it useful? Essentially, it doesn't matter what product or whatever you talk about, it falls into one of those three categories. And so, price, added value, the landscape, what are other people doing? What's the market like? What strategies can you implement? You can look at different scenarios and actually do game theory to figure it out. And what emotional things set off triggers? So, part of the reason why Microsoft paid so much is because Salesforce was driving the price up. Nestle paid a premium for Roundtree chocolate. These are the guys who make Cadbury and the Kit Kat. And everybody said Nestle overpaid. But here was the thing about Roundtree chocolate. They were just a local brand. And pretty much they just sold in England and France and close nearby nations. Nestle has a global network. And so because of that global distribution, they were able to sell their product in much higher volumes. During the dot-com boom, people started paying outrageous prices with things because nobody knew what it was worth. And Broadcast.com, which did streaming radio, Yahoo paid $4 billion for them. And who made out like a bandit? Mark Cuban. And what's the first thing Mark Cuban did when he got his money? He dumped, most of it was in Yahoo stock. He dumped it because he knew that the internet was a bubble. If he had not dumped it, he would have ended up with like $40 million. Hotmail, when they negotiated with Microsoft, and we'll see this, they only had one negotiator. And the reason why is Microsoft's approach to negotiation, they found out, was to get other people involved. Basically, split you up. Game theory, an example, is that poker players stay in hands they don't have good chances to win at just because there are large pots. And an example of emotional triggers, Jerry Colangelo hated the New York Yankees. And so when Curt Schilling came up to trade, they traded him to Boston. And they basically got 4 bags of balls. On the other hand, the Yankees offered him Robinson Cano, who's a possible Hall of Famer. So that emotional trigger basically really cost the D-backs. When you compete against people, you have to manage your expectations. Behavior rationality, and that's that are there things of how people behave which come in here, like reference points, framing, the doctrine of fairness, meaning if people feel like you're treating them unfairly, they get really upset and there goes your negotiation. Reference points are, for example, with cell phones, if I was paying cash, I'd be looking at the cost of that cell phone and thinking, geez, I could get a good computer for that kind of money. And is there a potential to be mutually beneficial for both parties? And what you need to do is figure out how you're going to bring down those barriers. You can play hardball. And what hardball means is you negotiate in an uncooperative manner. And in order to play hardball, you have to be in a position of considerable strength to be able to get away with it. And if you don't like it, then just walk away and make them chase. The thing is, if you have a personal connection, negotiations tend to go more smoothly because we do have empathy with each other. So that's why when you negotiate, try to get to know the people ahead of time. Find your similarities and be authentic. Because if you're authentic and truthful, people trust you. The whole goal is to find common ground, and you do it through all of these things. Not only that, remind people of their role, like, hey, you're here to make a deal. Find the measures on your favor. This is why storytelling is so important. What position you're in. Challenge them. Have them go at your data. And don't oversell it. When I was having a startup in solar, there was a Middle Eastern group that was thinking about investing, and they put me through 3 days of hell where they went at all my financial data, and I could justify each and every single number. Think about what your bottom line is. What's your walk away with? What are your options? And what are their options? And so then it becomes your move. Do you negotiate, walk away, or give in? Be consistent in what you do. You want to steer people in a certain direction. And there are different techniques. You can bully. You can come across as being smarter than everyone else. Maybe you get somebody's pity. Have empathy. Deflect it. It's not you, it's somebody else. Blame somebody else. And surrender is not necessarily as bad as you might think. Meaning, if you're in no position, then appeal to the other side's charity. And an example of that is, well, look, I can't do anything really about this, but do you think you can help me out here and give me this? Or something like that. But anyway, all these techniques, I went on a purchase trip with another engineer, and as it turns out, he was in sales, and he used all these tactics. I swear, I thought he should have won the Academy Award for the performance he puts on. Mysteries of New Jersey, rule number 5. There are 7 rules in the Mysteries of New Jersey. And number 5 is, do you have the stones to play the game you're playing? Meaning the stakes and everything else. Are you ready to play at that? How far are you willing to take it? Who's going to blink first? And determine your limits ahead of time. That way, when irrationality starts kicking in, you're grounded. You know what it is you want to take and what it is you don't want to take. Here's an example. Real estate. On the low end, it was $120 per square foot. I have 4 grandkids, but I didn't want to go over $300,000 to buy my cabin. So I found a 2,600 square foot property. It had a value of $312,000, but they were selling it for $287,000. And the thing is, it had a lot of perks. Huge monster garage, the kind you can bring a Winnebago into. I had air conditioning, and so I had all these bells and whistles, and they wanted $280,000 for it, and I offered $275,000. Well, they counter-offered at $287,000, which was the price. I thought they were going to come down at least a little bit. So I came in at $275,000 wanting $280,000, and they said, no, we already dropped the price from $310,000. We're not going any further. So I was pissed off because there was no negotiation. You're not serious about counter-offering. You should have come in at like $283,000 or something. On the other hand, at that point I could have walked away by just being angry, but I'm a rational person. It's a unique property. There wasn't that much in inventory, and I knew the sellers needed to sell. So the sellers proposed to sit down. Instead of cash, they offered something else, and this is a common tactic in negotiation. Maybe you have something that you don't value, but they do, so you substitute. And what they offered us was basically furniture, appliances, a lot of stuff in the shed, and the value of it all was $10,000. So we made the deal because they didn't want to move furniture down the mountain, and we didn't want to have to buy furniture to move up the mountain. And so we've had and enjoyed for many years now our getaway cabin. Now here's another example. Sitting behind a grand casino and hotel is a family restaurant equipment supply business. And we'll call the supply business Pop. And the owner of casino will call Casino. And what he wanted to do is he wanted to put up a big water wall in the back of the casino, and they would have to wipe out the family's distribution center. And not only that, but their guests looking out the window see it, and it's an eyesore. However, business has been in business for 90 years. And so the casino acts like that they don't need them. And they said, hey, we can build up the wall without getting rid of you. And so they act like they have zero interest. And they tell them they were looking for $200 a square foot. And they point out, look, it's going to cost us a lot of money to move. And then they said, but you'll save a fortune in taxes if you move. The problem with people who say you'll save a fortune in taxes is it's a percentage of something else. So it's really not the full value. So they passed, and they shook hands, and no deal was in place. On the other hand, the casino, they just said, call my office in a week, we'll make a deal. And the casino then said, just wait, they'll come around. They always do. And who was the negotiator in all this? Donald Trump. And they didn't come around. And once again, it shows what Donald Trump's negotiating tactics are. He always makes himself off as being such a great negotiator, but the thing is, his best negotiations for him tend to be when he's in the strong position. If he's not in the strong position, he doesn't have a lot of negotiation tactics as far as I've seen. Anyway, Microsoft and Hotmail, this was back in the .com boom, and they didn't have any kind of email service, and Hotmail already had 7 million users, and Microsoft was not doing well with email. I mean, they had trouble servicing their 2.5 million Outlook users. And so what ended up happening is that Hotmail's losing money, but on the other hand, the founder was given full negotiation to negotiate a deal, because I knew they needed to make a deal. The first meeting was actually with Gates in 1997, and Microsoft brought an army of their 15 businessmen, lawyers, and executives, and Hotmail showed up with 3 negotiators. So Hotmail's wondering, what should we ask for? And then the VC said, you want to hit 200 million. 200 million would be a good number. And then the CEO says, well, why not $1 billion? And so Microsoft knows how much they're worth, and they come in at 160 million. So they lowball a little bit. Hotmail says it's not enough. Microsoft says, how much do you want? Hotmail says, we want 700 million. So Microsoft got really upset with them and said, we're walking. They thought, AOL stuck by their guns, and they're worth more than $1 billion now. On the other hand, Pointcast turned down $400 million and ended up going belly up. There's a lot of risk and uncertainty here. So then they came in at what their asking price was, $200 million. On the other hand, they thought, we're worth more than that. It's not enough. All right, Microsoft said, $250, sweeten the pot, let's get a deal done. It's not enough. Now the thing is, Rocket Mail was also out there. So they could have taken that $250, gone to Rocket Mail and said, if you don't take it, we're going to Hotmail. And at this point, this is where you start playing the relationship game. And they told them, I hope you know what you're doing. I hope your employees don't find out that you're wrecking their futures. And the CEO starts getting sweating. And then Microsoft comes back again and says 300 million. Hotmail says it's not enough. Microsoft says, we're walking. You guys are ridiculous. And then they came back again and said 350. Hotmail said it's not enough. And then Microsoft said, last offer, take it or leave it, 400 million. Hotmail took it. Deal. Then, normally you get buyer's remorse and you start thinking, maybe we should have held out for $1 billion. Anyway, some other topics that are related to negotiation that help you is game theory, communication, having good emotional, social, and cultural intelligence helps you, and what kind of technical skills do you have, like in economics or finance. And so that's the basic of negotiation. Enjoy the negotiation team. Honda and Harley-Davidson.